Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so it's me again for functional grammar class, and for this video I'm going to discuss the first material, and here I also wrote the title of the book and the writer, so this is the reference. So the materials is of this PowerPoint slides based on this book. Okay, and these are the contents of this book. So chapter 1 is about the ideas and philosophy that I'm going to discuss in more detail in this video. And then next is about towards the functional grammar, so the foundation of analysis using functional grammar. And the next one is about experiential meaning, and here I wrote 1 and 2. It means that the discussion for group 1 will be about these pages, and for group 2. And the next chapter is about exploring interpersonal meaning, which discuss about language as a means of interaction, and will be discussed with group 3. And then next, still interpersonal meaning, but talking about language to show position. And then the next one is about exploring textual meaning, so we talk more about coherence and cohesion in this chapter. And the next one is about patterns of clause combination. We'll talk about kinds of clauses, including independent clause, dependent clause, and also embedded clause and interrupting clause. And the next one is about exploring context. So we kind of discussing the whole that we have talked before in chapter 8 here. And then again talk about text, so kinds of text, genres, and functional grammar and language education. So for group 8 is until chapter 8. Okay, now let's move to chapter 1. It's about ideas and philosophy. First, the influence of context. Yeah, so here you need to be aware that context influences a lot the text. So like for example, when we are in the situation in the market, of course we are going to use words, language of selling and buying, for example. But when we move to a classroom and then we change our words, we're not talking about buying and selling anymore, but we talk about being students and teacher or lecturer. So when we change the language based on the context, it means that we are taking a functional view of language, and there are some elements in it. So here in this class, even though the title of the subject is functional grammar, so we have grammar, but we do not talk about sets of rules. Yeah? We do not talk about tenses or modal auxiliaries or even gerund infinitives. No, we do not talk about that, but we will discuss about the set of resources. Yeah, so we talk more about the linguistic part. Okay, so what does it mean by resources? So actually, functional grammar is part of linguistics. So I'm going to show you later the position of functional grammar. Okay, first, here, still in the first part of this introduction, we have to understand what the meaning of text, because text is gonna be the main point of the discussion. So what is text? When we talk about text, we tend to refer to written work. So for example, you may ask, where is the text? And then you may show a piece of paper. But here, text is not just a written work, but text is a piece of language in use, with a harmonious collection of meanings appropriate to its context. So text is a piece of language. It can be spoken, it can be written. So like when you are in the market and you meet a seller and then you are the buyer, and then you may use the word, how much is a kilo of chili? And then the buyer said, oh, it's 50,000 a kilo. And then and so on and so forth. So those are texts of conversation between seller and buyer in the market, with harmonious collection of meaning appropriate to its context. So saying how much is this is appropriate to the context of the market or buying and selling, and it has harmonious collection of meanings. So we start with asking the price, and then we continue with paying the amount of money, and then we may get a change after that. So that is what we call as text. A similar way, text also in a written form, like for example a letter of application or application letter. For example, application letter we use for example in the above, in the first part, it has the name of the company, and then after that you write dear sir, and then after that I'm writing this letter based on your advertisement, for example, job vacancy, and then after that you in the last part you say sincerely yours. So those are texts of application letter, and of course it has appropriate to context, because the application letter, it means that we apply for a job, so we need to write things about the job, so it's appropriate. And harmonious collection, of course we follow the structure of a letter. We start with dear sir, and then we mention what we want to say about the job, and then in the last part we mention our name. Okay, so this is the example of written text. Okay, next, texts have both texture and structure. What does it mean? So text, just what I have mentioned before, has texture. It means that the meanings in the text fit coherently, just like a carpet or a cloth. The meanings means the words that we use from the first until the last of the text. So like when we talk about job application, so from the first part of the text until the last, we talk only about job application. We do not talk about something else. So it means that the meanings in the text fit coherently. Okay, and like for example, in the classroom. So usually in the classroom, the teacher said, "Good morning, how are you, student?" And then we are going to talk about this today, and so on. Any questions? And then in the last, the teacher say, "That's all for today. See you next week." Okay, so those are the meanings in the text, and of course it fits coherently, talking about the subject, talking about the class. So the teacher will not say to the student, "Okay, for example, can I clean your car?" So of course it doesn't mean it's not correct for the context of teaching. So this is what it means by texture. And then the text also have structure, which means that the language contains certain obligatory structural elements based on purpose and context. So it has the structural elements, like for example, when we are in the teaching and learning process, so we have the structure of opening, and then pre-activity, whilst activity, closing, and so on. And for example, when we talk about text type, like in say procedure text, if we talk about procedure text, there must be elements. So the first is ingredient, and then the next is steps. Okay, so those are the structural element. So every text has texture and structure. Okay, now let's move to this, the relationship between text and context. Okay, when we look at these circles, there are 3 circles, and in the middle is text. So it means that text is influenced by the context. And there are two contexts. The first is context of situation, and the second is context of culture. And what does it mean? It means that, for example, every time we say something or we write something, we use words and then we arrange it. It depends on the situation. So, for example, when we are in the market, so that's the situation in the market. So the text will be talking about selling and buying. How much? Okay, so a kilo of something. So the text is based on the situation. But when we are in the classroom, we are not talking about how much, the price, but we talk about what the assignment, for example. And of course, you cannot ask the assignment to the people in the market. And the context of situation is also influenced by the context of culture. So different culture may have different situation and also different text or different words in use. Say, for example, like in the classroom. Here in Indonesia, in our culture, whenever we are in the classroom, we call our teacher, our lecturer by giving them articles. Giving them a title like Bapak or Ibu. And it's so not appropriate to only call the names. But it's different when we move to a Western culture. For example, like in my experience, when I did my study for postgraduate study in Australia, there we didn't call the lecturer by giving title, so we just call the name and it's fine. So the culture in that context, it's okay to call the lecturer directly the names. For example, when you ask me questions, Memfa, who is your favorite lecturer when you did your postgraduate study in Australia? And then I will say, oh, I like Julie Harrington. So I do not say Bu Julie, but directly Julie Harrington, and it's fine. But in our context in here in Indonesia, of course you have to say Pa or Bu. Otherwise it's dangerous. Yeah. Okay, so remember, text is influenced by the context of situation and context of culture. Okay, now let's move to text. Okay, so text is divided into three parts. So text has three parts. It has field and tenor and mode. Okay, it should be tenor first, but because it's alphabetical, so mode comes first. Yeah, so what's that? So here are the examples of meta-language. Meta-language is a specific vocabulary used in this discussion in functional grammar to give a special meaning, to give a certain meaning. So if you find the word field here, it doesn't mean sawah or lapangan, no. And when we talk about mode, it's not about model or something like that, but we have to check the dictionary of linguistics, because here actually when we talk about field of a text, field is what's the text about. Yeah, so what's the content of the text? That's what we discuss in field. Okay, I'm going to show the next one. Yeah, so what to be talked or written about. For example, when we talk about a job application, so the topic is about job application. And then tenor. So tenor is the relationship between the speaker and the writer, or the hearer and the reader. So when we talk the example of job application later, and then it's about the tenor must be employer and applicant. So the people who have a communication or interaction. And then mode, the last one, is the kind of text. So like when we talk about job application, it can be application later. So the mode is application later, and then the tenor are employer and applicant, and then the field is job application. And these three parts of text are actually related to the function of language, which is functional grammar. Yeah. So field is has the function to talk about what is happening, or what will happen, what happened. So it's about our experience in this world. And the function is called ideational or experiential and logical meaning. So this is the first one, and it will be discussed next week in more detail by group 1 and 2. And then the second one, tenor, is function to interact and or to express a point of view, which is about interpersonal meaning. So to interact is the next function of interpersonal meaning, and then after that we talk about the function of language to express a point of view, to express an idea, to express an argument. Okay, here. And then the last one, mode, is about textual meaning, which functions to turn the output of the previous two functions into coherent whole, or I said about the kind of text. Okay, and the next, okay, here, as I said, that functional grammar is actually part of linguistic. And here, when we talk about the levels of language, there are two levels. The first is extra-linguistic levels, and then linguistic levels. So when we have a look at this one, let's start from here. Okay, so start from the bottom. There are two parts of linguistic levels: content levels and expression levels. Why do I start from the bottom? Because what we can see and what we can hear, or what we can feel perhaps, is the expression level. So when we can hear someone, it means that the language they use is in the form of phonology. But when we see something written, so the language is in graphology. It's a written work and this one is spoken. Or maybe we may find the language used in gestures or body language. So that's why the expression level is something that can be seen or can be heard. And then whatever we write, whatever we say, whatever the gesture we show, they have content levels. So they have semantic and also lexical grammar. Okay, pay attention to these terms, lexical grammar. Lexical grammar is a combination of lexical and grammar. Lexical is about vocabulary or morphology, and grammar is about syntax. So lexical grammar is a combination of syntax and morphology, and then semantic is about meanings. So for example, when someone asked you the sentence, for example, the question is, do you know my book? For example, do you know my book? That's the question, and then you answer with a gesture. For example, like shaking your head. Yes, shaking your head. And of course, your friend will understand. It means shaking your head means I don't know. And I don't know is a sentence. It has 3 words: I, don't, and then know. So when you choose I and don't and know, those are lexical. And then when you arrange I first and then don't first and then know next, it's a grammar. So lexical grammar is system of wordings. So how words how words chosen, and then how the words is formed. And then grammar is how the words arrange to be phrases or sentences or clauses. And then the semantic, of course, the meaning. Okay, that's the example of gesture. Or it can be in the example of phonology. So when someone asks you, do you know my book? And then you say, I don't know. Okay, so you answer using your voice. It means phonology. And when you choose the words I don't know, it's a lexical grammar. And then it means the meaning that you cannot answer, you cannot give information about where the book is because you have no idea about it. So that's the meaning, semantic level. Or in graphology, in written, for example, someone texts you in WhatsApp asking, do you know my book? And then you text back, you reply saying, I don't know, in WhatsApp. It means graphology. And again, the words, the sentences, I don't know, those are lexical grammar. And it has semantic meaning. So those are linguistic levels. And then the linguistic levels, we call them as texts. So these linguistic levels are texts. And then this text is influenced by the context, extra-linguistic levels, which are context of culture and context of situations. So you have to remember this diagram because later in chapter 8 we will again discuss about this and related to each discussions afterward. Okay, again here I think I have mentioned about meta-language. So meta-language is a specialized descriptive vocabulary. So it's a special vocabulary like field, mode and tenor. Yeah. Okay, this is going to be the last part, text types. So there are two kind of text types, registers and genres. Yeah. So registers is the text with the same sort of meaning. So like when you are, when a teacher, talks in a classroom. So from one teacher with another teacher, from one classroom to another classroom, they usually have similar words to be used and similar pattern. Like for example, every class the teacher always greet the student by saying good morning or assalamualaikum. So those are the register, and every teacher, most of the teacher will say, okay student, today's material is blah 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 blah. So those are the register for teacher talk. And genres. Okay, I think maybe you have discussed about genres in your writing class. So genre is about text type which say that text share the same goal, shares the same general purpose in culture. So it often shares the same obligatory and optional structural elements. So it's like a type, text types, yeah. So like based on the purpose. So if you write a text to tell what happened in the past, so the text types is called recount text. But if you want to construct a pattern of events to entertain the reader, so it is called narrative. But if you want to write or say something to tell how to do something, tell someone how to do something, so the text is called as procedure. Let's see the example, the first example. So this text is telling what happened to a girl. So this is the text. There's a girl in my class. She tried to do a backward roll and she like her neck clicked or something, and she was taken to hospital in ambulance. And I had to write down what happened because I was in her group. I've done that before and it doesn't hurt that much. I think she's overreacting just a bit. So this is the text, and this text is divided into 4 parts. So this text fits recount text with these structural elements, starting with orientation, information about who, record of the events in the order in which they occurred. So what happened first, and then next, and then next, and then the last one. Before the last one, we have reorientation, rounding off the sequence of events and what happened. And then the last one, coda, the personal evaluation. So these are the structural elements of recount text. So whenever we make recount text, we have to follow these structural elements. And then we have a look at narrative. One day a monster came out of my hot water pipe. I was very frightened. I called my mom, and she came and saw the flugel boogie and ran outside. Okay, flugel boogie. It's like imaginary names. So it's a narrative. It's usually not happen in the real life. I wanted to make friend with it and give it a name, so I called it a flugel boogie, and that right, it came to bed with me that night, perhaps. And I found that a flugel boogie snores very loud indeed, and my mom was too frightened to come and kiss me good night. So this is an imaginary story, so it's a narrative with the structural elements starting with the orientation, complication, resolution, and coda. It's similar to recount, but it has some differences. And it's a very different one. The examples of procedure text. So we don't have a set of events, but it is started with the goals. Yeah, with the goal, like for example, how to catch a wave. Here's some advice for kids who are just learning to surf. And the procedure, because how to learn how to surf, how to catch a wave, yeah, how to surf. The materials, light fiberglass board with leg rope and a wetsuit if it's cold. Okay, so these are the materials what we need. And then it has steps. First, find a safe, uncrowded spot in the beach. The water should be not too choppy so that you will get a clean ride. Next, don't go out too far if you haven't surfed before. Wait until you see a small wave, then lie on your surfboard. Next, when the wave is close, start paddling furiously. If you are more experienced, you could try kneeling on the boards once you are on the wave. The most important thing is to keep your balance, or else you will end up falling off the board. Yeah, so these are the steps, and these are the structural elements of procedure. Okay, I think that's all for this video. I hope this can help you understand, and if you have questions, you can just ask me. Thank you, and that's all.